Hey everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be all about the books that I read during the month of July. Some of them I finished, about 8 of them, and some of them I didn't finish. I have quite a few that I keep putting down, mostly audiobooks. I don't know what's going on. I'm just not going to question it. I'm not in a reading slump. So I'm just going to share reviews of all of them and let you know which ones I would recommend. The first one I want to mention is probably the best book that I've read this month, and it is The Shadow of What Was Lost. This is my second book by the author. I read The Will of the Many. This was my first 5-star of the year and my first finished book. So things were going well, and I wanted to try more by him because this is not a completed series, and this one is. I saw this label as adult, but I think this is fantasy YA, young adult, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. They tend to be more readable, but I feel like it had a few weaknesses that I think are more common in the YA genre. With that said, first book in a series, it's all out, so I can binge read it. You follow the main character who essentially grew up in this magical school, and he does have magical powers, but he can't seem to use them. So in that world, whenever you're unable to actually use them, you get branded, scarred, you lose your power. And a few days before that happens, he kind of escaped to go on a mission that he's asked to go on. There's this wall in the north, which for some reason, I've read like 3 books recently with that, but there are monsters coming out and he has to go and like help people. So that's how it starts. And I am enjoying it. I do think that the friendships are great. The characters, I'm invested. I think a few of the weaknesses that I've noticed is that every time someone has a power or like there's something that could make them too strong, the author comes back and tries to like fix it, which I feel like is definitely a weakness in the book. For example, the main male character, he can tell whenever people lie, and that happens really quickly, so it's not a spoiler. But eventually, they have to like make it more fair and like harder, otherwise it's just too easy. So it happened a few times with a few different characters, so I felt like that was definitely something that I noticed. With that said, there's definitely enough political intrigue and world building and the magic system and mystery, because there's definitely one that I still am looking for the answers that happen towards the end, which I'm assuming we're going to get in book 2 or 3, but I'm looking forward to it. But I do think it's still worth mentioning because that's also something that I noticed in the other book. So it seems to be something that happens a lot with the author, but I still gave it 4.5 stars. So probably not that big of a deal. I did really enjoy it, and I read this whole thing really fast. So that was great. Audiobooks, I did finish Yours Truly. This is the second book in this Part of Your World series. They're loosely connected. You don't have to read them in order. I listened to book 1 and 3 already, so I finally got book 2 from the library, and I didn't know how I was going to feel because book 1 is really great. I'm not a big romance reader, yet I was giggling and laughing, kicking my feet, listening to the first one. And I was hoping it was going to continue. And book 3 was good, but book 2, I had issues with it. It starts fine. It's one of the characters that is in book 1 that is in there. She works in healthcare, and she meets this guy. He has anxiety, and like they start pretending to date, and obviously feelings start blossoming, blah blah blah. My problem is that I would say about midpoint, things just start going in a wrong direction, and it just got so bad that I had 1 hour left in the audiobook and I put it down for like 2 days because I didn't want to continue. I was so mad with the way things were going. I almost did not finish it. So I could tell you more about the story, but I feel like telling you anything else would just ruin the few bits that are good in here. So yeah, I'm really, really disappointed. I'm giving it 2-star after giving the first book like 4. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm actually mad. So the only other audiobook that I finished was The Art Thief, a true story of love, crime, and dangerous obsession. So you follow this couple, but mainly this man who has been stealing paintings and like crossbows and stuff. Like I feel like it's hard not to judge the person, not because he steals stuff, the way he perceives himself, right? You have to be a certain kind of person to steal art from museums, obviously, but very much like, oh, I'm better than everyone else. But I couldn't stop laughing, not because of the way the book was written, but the way because he lives in his mom, like attic, essentially. He doesn't work, but the women in his life, like his girlfriend, his mom, are basically paying for him to live. All of this to say, I really was not focusing on the story at all. I was just focusing on my personal judgment, which kind of tells you that the audiobook or just the book in general was just okay for me. I feel like I don't really want to rate this, but maybe 3. It wasn't a bad book. It was very short. I think it was about 6 hours, but I just was not invested in the actual storytelling. It's a nonfiction, but still, it was just okay for me. I feel like I've seen it get really high ratings, so I was excited and it was different. And I don't think that I really like to try introduction into different topics with nonfiction, trying to figure out what I like, and I don't think that this is for me. This is where I feel like that summarizes my thoughts without being too judgy. I'm judging books, right? That's the whole point of my reviews. But yeah, that wasn't for me. Then things went really bad as expected because I did a reading vlog where I was reading books that you thought I was going to hate, but books that I already owned. Obviously, I didn't go out of my way to buy some more. And it's just over the years I've accumulated books because I saw them on lists of like must read, especially fantasy and sci-fi, and realizing that there are certain things that I don't like to read. And it happens really often with these specific genre that they're there. And you told me I wasn't going to like them, and you were right. The first one I read was The Painted Men. I finished the whole thing. Frankly, I shouldn't have, but it felt almost like you're watching a train wreck and you just can't stop looking. And to be fair, it doesn't start that bad. The world building was definitely intriguing. That's why I wanted to read this. This is an adult fantasy series, and also one that I feel like could have been categorized as YA. But you have one character, my male character, is very young in the beginning. He's like 13, 11, 13, and I'm going to include super mild spoilers, but like it happens so quickly into the book. But his mom dies, and that's what starts his journey, which is one of my most hated tropes. It happens twice in the book that something like a female character dies for someone to start their journey, which like once was bad, two is worse. And you have an incest scene apparently just for fun. It barely has anything to do with the story. It's just, you know, there's obviously some essay scenes, one of them towards the end that you had warned me I was going to hate. I thought it was going to be prior to this, which was already annoying, but that got really, really bad. And like, again, mild spoiler, but it's just a female character story. Like, it's the least important part of the book, of course. She essentially gets raped by three men, and then pretty much right away, like 3 days later, has sex with the male character. I'm sorry, but Mr. Brett, have you ever spoken to a woman? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, I understand fantasy world, but you don't have to put all of your female characters through so much trauma like that. Especially whenever it's just there to make the story interesting for the male characters. Like, no. If you want to see me rant with all the quotes and everything, I will link the vlog. Definitely recommend it because, again, it gets so much worse. It's just nonstop trauma. But I really wanted to figure out what was going to happen. That's why I finished it, because in that world, everything is really dangerous. Years prior, they were demons that were coming out of the ground at night, and then they went away. So humanity kind of forgot about magic and started focusing on science. And 200 years later, they're back and we're utterly unprepared. And you're seeing them trying to survive. And the male character obviously wants to grow up and try to fix everything. So that's what I wanted to, why I wanted to push through and figure it out. But obviously it's the first book. I don't know how many books, like 5 or something. And I'm not going to continue because I don't think the story was good enough to compensate. Because even if you forget all the complaints I had, I do still feel like this book needed a lot of editing, and it just needed to be concised a little bit more. And yeah, I can't look past all my issues with it though. So it's just not worth it. It is what it is. I read it, and it's going back in my unhaul shelf over here as soon as I'm done with this video, because I don't want this on my shelf. I did not care for it. And the other one that I read or attempted to read in that vlog was this one. This is Ring World. This is an adult sci-fi book. I haven't read a ton of sci-fi this year, and this is like a classic sci-fi. And as much as I like to read them, or used to like reading them for the concepts, I think it's interesting to see how it started, compare it to how it is today. I can no longer look past a lot of my issues with these books, and it's becoming harder and harder. And this one, really quickly, it becomes really annoying. To be fair, I don't think the main male character is supposed to be super likable. I don't think you're supposed to hate him, but I don't think he's supposed to be that amazing. But he's 200 years old, and he meets this woman who, at his birthday party, who's basically the descendant of someone that he used to love, and she's 20. So 180-year-old age gap. And of course, they end up together. 2 days later, she's in love. Blah, blah. Yeah, he's calling her shallow. And like, anyway, super quickly got really annoying. And I just realized I'm not enjoying it. You read 100 pages, you're still not enjoying it. And you have those issues. I used to push myself to finish books when that would happen. And I've realized since there's no point, it never gets good enough to compensate. So no, we're on a roll. So one more book that I'm also unhauling, and I'm sad. This one I'm really sad about, and it is The Bone Season. I was really looking for this one. This was part of my Read It Unhaul It challenge. I had just unhauled this book because originally it was written in 2013, and the author rewrote them, is republishing them 10 years later. So this one was 2023. So I found it at the used bookstore. I got really excited, and I read it pretty much right away, luckily due to the jar for the Read It and Haul It challenge. And it wasn't good. It wasn't good. I don't know what she changed. I mean, I guess there's only so much she can change considering that the series is already published. But this reminded me of like old school 2010s of dystopian novels, like fantasy sci-fi ones. It's all set in the UK. She has magical powers and she is very special and she gets kidnapped and kept in this house with this sexy man. And they're persecuted. She's oppressed. And that's, you know, the classic angst, another Y fantasy. And I just found it kind of boring. I really enjoyed the friendships. And this one, I feel like that was really the strength between the characters, but she's isolated from the other one. So you don't see enough of it. And I just didn't care. I pushed through because I really thought it was going to get better because this is well loved. And I do not love it. I love her other books, which is also why I kept reading. The Pre-Ordering Tree, A Day of Fallen Night, or adult fantasy. Love those. And yeah, I don't think I'm going to continue this series. I gave it also 2. It sounds harsh because I really wanted to love it, but I didn't like even how the romance was done. I didn't care. It hurts my soul to say this, but I just really, really didn't. I think I can still have book 2 downstairs. I got rid of book 1 and 2 because they were being rewritten, right? And I still have the book 2, and I thought maybe I could give it a shot, but I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm sad. Okay, we're going back to books that I did enjoy because I did, in fact, like some of the books that I've read this month, and we're matching. Bright Young Women. This was also from the jar. I only had this like a year or 2. Like it's been recent. When was it published? Last year, 2023. So this wasn't on my shelf for very long, but I had heard good things about this. But then as soon as I mentioned, oh, I want to read this, a few people were like, oh, I don't think you're going to like this. Made me nervous, but no, I did like this. So it is inspired by a true story. I don't know really the whole details, frankly. I am not someone that reads or listens to anything to do with true crimes, but Ted Bundy inspired. So it's mostly set in the 70s. You have the main female character who is part of a sorority, and her kind of best friend, kind of roommate, is murdered, including a few of the girls from the sorority, by this serial killer. There's also another timeline that you're following a woman who having a difficult relationship with her mother. Her father passed away, so she goes to this support group, and things end up eventually, you know, the stories converge and things make sense. I did really enjoy it. I like that the author makes some social commentary through the mouth, really, of the character. Like mentioning how the judge would say things like describing the defendant as a bright young man, you know, or a promising young man. I feel like it's something that we see a little too often with judges having more empathy for the killers than the victims. Frankly, I find it super disturbing. It makes you wonder, like, what have you done in your life prior to all of this to have so much empathy for him and not for the victims? Anyway, also some of you commented that his female lawyer is inspired by someone else in real life. So if you like true crimes, I think you would enjoy this in general. But knowing absolutely nothing about the story, I still gave it 4-star and I was invested. I do feel like it takes a little while to get into, which is probably why, again, I was a little confused. But eventually things pick up and I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to reading more mystery thrillers in general. I feel like it hasn't been that great for me the last couple of years. And this was the best one that I've read, at least this year. I also finished Two Twisted Crowns, which is book 2 in the Shepherd King series. This is another YA fantasy. I don't know why I read so many this month. It kind of happened that way. To be fair, some of them were not labeled as YA. I just think they are. But this one I knew. I read book 1 early this year, so this is the second book and last book. This is a duology, so finished the series. I'm happy about that. This one you're following the main female character who got sick with this magical disease when she was a child. There's this mist that infects people and they can develop superpowers, magical powers. But she thinks she's fine because she can only hear a voice. She's like, sure, you're fine. In this world, this kingdom, people get, if they're found to have magical powers, her family is hiding her. And there's also magical cards, but that's fine to use that magic. And they're trying to collect all of them in order to, you know, get the mist to go away and everything. So that's kind of the premise of the series. There's a lot of political intrigue in book 2. There's still some romance, but it's not like googly eye insta love as much as book 1. And you're not really following the same character. Well, yes, but like no, from the first book, which is why you were saying that it's completely different. So I agree it is different. I still think I liked book one better. So this one I'm going to give it 3 star. It wasn't a bad book. I just wasn't as emotionally invested, but I was still curious enough to finish it. And I'm glad I did because again, you get all the answers about where this came from. What's the whole, like, not almost mythical stories. It's almost like a retelling of a fairy tale, kind of. So I overall enjoyed it, which brought me to the book that I'm currently reading. I finally started Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. I'm a little over 100 pages into it. Oop, that was backward. There we go. I feel like every time I talk about this book, I'm matching with it. Listen, we're vibing, okay? This is the third book in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This is going to be his most epic series. It's going to be a 10-book series. The fifth book, which there are going to be 2 5-book series, really. The fifth book is coming out, I believe, at the end of the year. So I can finally binge read it, and I've been just neglecting it because of the size. This is 1,200 on the big page, and I was terrified, but I finally started again, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. The world building, the magic system. This is, I feel like in general, fantasy can be difficult to explain to people what the story's about. Like I feel like I'm trying to do it in this video and I'm struggling. This one, I literally cannot tell you what it is about. It's just so complicated. There's just so much magical system, world building, stuff happening, so many characters. It's overwhelming, but not in a bad way. So this wouldn't be my first recommendation if you want to start reading fantasy. I did do videos about that, but I would highly recommend this if you are someone that enjoys fantasy. I feel like you've probably heard of this series. I feel like it's the series that you see everywhere. So I'm glad I'm finally getting around to continuing. And so far, it's going really well. It's probably going to be almost the only book I read next month, but I'm okay with it. So I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself. I think things are still going relatively well. I'm going to put on the screen actually my August TBR because I have so many good plans for next month. I feel like things are going to be epic, content-wise, but also book-wise. I feel like I have a couple books. I have the pile right here, and I'm like staring at it. I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to have the best reading month ever. Last time I said that was in 2020. I did a video where I was like, I'm going to have the best reading year ever. I feel responsible for everything that happened. I'm not going to say that again, ever. Coping with some dark humor. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you in an upcoming video very soon. Bye.